Welcome to the CRF Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm joined today by Subtitled.
Heyo.
And I'm also joined by the German machine, Sebi.
Yeah, what's up?
And we're essentially going to spend the next 10 minutes giving you an up-to-date on where CRF is, the racing, the future, and so on and so forth. So I think the first topic we're going to dive into is the current season. We're going to start mainly focus on CRF 1. We're going to go race by race, talk about some drivers, talk about, how we think performances, who do you think has been surprising in terms of performances, and go from there. So I think we'll start off with the first race of the season, which I think was
Bahrain.
First race of Bahrain, yes.
Bahrain. Yeah, sorry. Speak about that and what we kind of think in terms of the result. I think Bahrain is for a start. I think Bahrain's quite a controversial track. I feel like it's a very hit or miss. I mean, from personal experience driving, what's your do you think is Bahrain quite a weird one? I feel like the track layout and the setup's a bit more difficult to master. Personally, I think a high wing setup's quite debatable around there, but there's so many straights. I feel like that's the issue.
It definitely takes you got to be really knowing what you're doing most of the time, because there's when you rate in the race, there's just so much low grip, and especially with the long straights and the corners, you gotta have enough wing to make the corners, but not too much so you're gonna die in the straights.
Yeah, I think that's the main. But I think finding the right balance there is why it's such a difficult track. I think in terms of I don't think the racing there is bad, but I think it can be very hit and miss.
No, the racing there is usually always pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, but I think it depends on the caliber of drive you've got racing, because
definitely
I feel like there's so many lock-up spots as well, which I think are pretty challenging.
Yeah, that's why I definitely say that's one of the more it takes an experienced driver to be fast at that track.
Yeah. Bahrain, the top three had Jack, who won, and then he was 11 seconds ahead of Dom in the Ferrari at second, and then behind Dom was Ghost. I think, and then Parker in P4, just a notable mention. Parker, he won Mexico last season, didn't he? Which was quite an out of the way kind of result from him, which was quite good. The gap of 11 seconds is, we all know Jack's rapid. He's a two-time champion. It's quite a big gap. I think you see a lot of big gaps around Bahrain, but still, I think it's quite a massive gap. So, I think did Jack win there? Did we race it last season?
No. I don't think. No.
Yeah, I think we started Australia last season, didn't we? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because that's where Mark almost had a 1-2.
We had Bahrain last season, if I'm thinking correct. Yeah, we did. Round 2 was Bahrain.
Oh, was it? Who won?
Yeah, Beeford has won with Hobbs in second and Ghost in third. We do see Ghost a lot also in qualifying. In qualifying, he did qualify pole on Bahrain this season.
Bahrain?
I feel like something happened, but if we just jump into those kind of top guys, I think right now, if we're talking the top ranking, you've obviously got Jack, Dom, Ghost. Today Switch showed a brilliant performance. The pace from him was pretty good, to be fair. I did not see that coming. I think he came in Bahrain, Switch was P9, and then in Saudi he was P8, and then he was fighting for a win and beat, probably the fastest driver CRF's ever seen. Other than, I guess you could debate the whole Beeford thing. Technically they're 1 for 1 in terms of they raced 2 seasons against each other and they both won 1 season each. So between Beeford and Jack, but I think it's an incredible drive.
I think last season Beeford didn't really give a
I think it's a case of, I think this is, it comes on to what we'll talk about later about F1 24 coming out and stuff, and I think the community is very much looking forward to the new game, purely just because I think this game had its flaws, especially some people disagree, especially regarding the traction, because personally, when I actually raced back in F1 20 and 21, the mechanical grip was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I just when the cars changed in 22, I was at the front still fighting for a championship for 2 seasons, but I didn't have the pace advantage I had on the old games. And I think the whole system, this game, it's been better than 22, because I feel like F1 22 was a real write-off. I just feel like the handling was terrible, and that the throttle application has been very selective. This game's been better. And I think you see drivers like Jack, and especially people like Dom as well, who are able to pick that up faster, end up being faster overall just because they're able to get on the throttle quicker without spinning it. Sub, from racing this game that it's a very difficult one to put your foot down. It's easier than last game, but if you're comparing to 21 and 20, it's still very difficult.
Coming from Because I got here 21. I didn't really understand the game that much. Going straight into 22. 22's throttle, the car was so unbalanced. The game started off great, but the unbalance of everything and just how the car never felt the same. Like anywhere you would do and you're sliding in full speed corners, I would say 23 is a great upgrade from 22. I mean, it's definitely not realistic because there's only really one driving style that you can have that's going to work. Like I've seen in like the trailers, like people talking about 24 is the car looks like it has actual suspension now. Like the car bounces and stuff like real life. You can actually watch it in the trailer, the Ferrari bouncing around Monaco. Besides that, I hope balance is going to be a bigger key and it's going to support more driving styles.
Yeah. I mean, F1 2020, I feel like, especially between like different motorsports, and I think this is kind of what Sebi can provide input. Sebi races more ACC and GT3 than he does F1. I think it's more difficult now to hop between different motorsports. So, racing like a CRF Motorsport event in a GT3, not ACC, and then hopping in and racing F1. I feel like that kind of difference is, I don't know, I think it's harder to hop in and out of cars, and when you practice, it kind of overlaps, and it's a bit more difficult. It's kind of hard to focus on one, but also race the other and still be at like peak performance. I mean, Sebi, you race both games. Like, do you feel that your approach changed? Like, I don't know. Do you feel like your focus kind of changes, and then if you put too much into one, you kind of lose the other, or are you able to balance that well? Because I personally think it's more hard to balance now than it ever has been.
For me, the balancing part is not particularly easy, but it is doable. I mean, so far I've tried it, so far I've done it. But if we really look at the overall picture, I think it is really hard because of the fact that the other cars really feel weighty in the other games. They slide around a lot more. They have a lot less traction. Even by those facts alone, comparing to F1 is really hard just because of those facts alone. And when you really look deep into it, like the game that basically made you lose the most time was, I think personally, when it comes to switching games, was F1 22 because of that horrible turn-in understeer that you had, which made no sense. You had oversteer going out the corner, even with little throttle application, and going into the corner, your car wouldn't even turn, even if you dared to do so.
Yeah, but I think it was an inherent flaw of the game, and I don't know if you remember that when the game came out, I don't think it wasn't the worst, and they released a patch, I think probably 2 months after launch, and they wiped all TT leaderboards, and the traction was just horrible. The handling as a whole was terrible. I
can add on to that actually, because when I first played 22, like I was trying to take it seriously if I could actually get fast. Like I was on controller at the beginning of 22, and the car felt great. I could get on the throttle. I could do literally almost anything. I felt more confident on the controller at the beginning of 22 than I felt on wheel now. And then after that update, you literally would be in third gear or fourth gear, going like 80 miles an hour and hammer the throttle, and you'll still be spinning.
For me, it was quite the opposite way, actually. For me personally, it was quite the opposite way because of the fact that the handling patch made things more, I don't know, I'm the type of guy that likes unpredictable situations if they're unpredictable to a point. Before patch, it just wasn't for me, but after the patch, I was way faster.
I feel like that, I guess that's down to driving style. Like, I feel like some people are a bit more happy. Like, personally, I'm more happy with, on 20 and 21, I was more happy with a more rear snappy car, where the rear would come out and help you around corners and stuff. And I didn't mind it being unpredictable, but I feel like in these new cars, predictability is much more valuable, personally. I just think that the whole loss on throttle is something that's just really, especially when it comes to a consistency point. I mean, if you think about the kind of pressures that like Jack's in a race, especially today. I mean, Jack and Switch. I mean, other than the whole pit stop thing, where the safety car, I think the strategy today from Jack was quite an ambitious one. Like, speaking as a TP, like, I can't lie, watching the race, I wasn't happy with the original box because he pitted on lap 8 or something from the hards to mediums, and then he was down in P15. I was like, he's cutting through this field is so much of a risk. But I mean, he cut through quicker than Switch, who came out ahead of him. So I mean, there was like the kind of lapse of an overlay of that. But then once they kind of got back to the front, I mean, they were just neck and neck the whole time. Just like, I feel like in that kind of scenario, especially when you're battling wheel to wheel within a couple tenths of each other for 10 or more laps, like consistency, one little mistake is so just, it can absolutely destroy it. So I get the whole sometimes an unpredictable car is a bit more fun to drive and sometimes it can be more towards the drive. But I feel like, especially in this game, when it comes to race stints, I feel like you need to have a predictable car. And like, I don't know. I think it's maybe just a personal preference. I don't know if what you prefer. If you prefer, do you prefer predictable, unpredictable?
The thing I've actually struggled a lot with in this game is consistency, because the car just feels different sometimes. Like no matter what, like I would when I get up and practice, I'd practice and then I would put the game down for like an hour, and then I'd come back and then I'm spinning in places I was never spinning before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? There's no way like my muscle memory's gone within an hour of actually practicing for an hour. And I think the new game, the car is going to be a lot more loose but predictable.
Yeah, I think there's been, in terms of F1 24, I think there's been a lot of talk. I mean, we've had the closed beta has been happening recently. And I think the feedback I'm hearing is that the tyres are supposed to be a bit more difficult to manage. I understand that it's, they want to have a realistic perspective, but I feel like you've got to balance having it realistic with, the drivability of the game, the racing, and not everyone playing F1. And I think this is probably kind of the problem, is that, F1 kind of had its boom in 2021, and you had a load of new players coming onto the game, and the driving model wasn't hard to learn. It was easy. You could hop on as a beginner, no issues. And I feel like even on this game, like even around a basic track with full traction, like going around some corners, sometimes like the traction control just doesn't work, and you'll just spin anyway. I feel like that was never an issue on 20 and 21. So I think when it comes to new players, especially when it comes to league racing as a whole, it's much more difficult to attract drivers when the handling style is, I get it's becoming more realistic, but it's not, for some people, it's not like an option. It's like you want people to spend £60 or 70, 80 bucks on this game, but it's so difficult for beginners, and to really become competitive. Like, I'm not saying that spending, you should be able to straight on the pace, but like you really have to commit and spend a lot of time in this game to be able to get up to the pace. And I get it, there's like beginner leagues and stuff, but like I feel it's a lot of effort to learn the model, and especially when you're going game to game. I feel like the jump between 22 and 23 wasn't as big, but the 21 to 22, that whole like period was really difficult.
Yeah.
Like for me, I was like 21. I won all my title stuff. I clutched up my last season, my championship I had, and then I'm like, okay, got to get hit in for 22. We had 2 weeks before the start of the season. I sat there. I probably got 20 hours worth of track time in, and I turn up to the first race. I'm still competitive, but like you see a lot of people that were like relatively. I'm talking like Flo and Jamie. I guess were the main people. Like they were fast on 21, but they weren't to my pace. And then you see them kind of just jump up because the model's changed so much, and they've kind of just, it goes towards them. I think it comes back to like people's driving style. But I think when it comes to 24, I think EA, like I know there's been a lot of controversy, they really need to balance out the drivability of the cars. And I think the feedback from the beta, I don't know what you guys have heard. From my side, I think that that's not the direction we're going in, which I think is quite concerning for like league racing as a whole. Let's be frank, I feel like the game's already you look at the sales of the past 2 years, so the game is, in terms of the active players, it's shrinking and it's becoming more of a niche, which it was before. But for leagues, especially when you're trying to expand, it makes it very much more difficult. And especially, and I think it's also affected driving standards because it's so much easier to lose it and spin and crash into someone. And I think that's an issue that all leagues have had, where, PSGL last year, they had massive, they're still having it. It's not as bad before, but I think they had massive driving standard issues, even with pros. I don't think it's just your amateur player. I think the game invites you to be aggressive to extract maximum performance, but if you go over the top or make one little mistake, your car spins around and you're in a wall and you've dragged someone with you. Yeah. I think that's one thing that from my side, the one thing I want them to improve on 24 is just the general drivability for everyone. So, so what's one thing that you'd say to change for 24?
That's exactly like how I feel. Like when I was saying like supporting more than one driving style, it's literally like you can barely go for a dive bomb in this game without being right on their butt.
Yeah.
And it's either you're gonna not make the corner because you're trying to get in front of them and go next to them. Like if you brake like a millimeter later, you're not gonna make the corner. Pretty much. That's how the car works. and it doesn't feel like there's any accessibility with anything. It feels like the game is only made to go this way and this way only. There's not open availability for everything. Like when I do iRacing, there's different lines you see with everybody.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sebi, what's one thing you'd think to improve for 24?
Bring back 2020 handling. Bring back 2020 handling. That's all we need.
I get it from like the thing, but I mean, it's physically impossible. Like the cars have changed so much, you can't really have that level of mechanical grip that 2020 had. I mean, 2020 was definitely my fastest F1 game. It was my favorite. I mean, driving that black Mercedes was just the best. The amount of grip and the throttle, it was brilliant. You could just throw the car in. You didn't have to fully crank the wheel 90 degrees to get it around a corner. 15, 20 degrees steering angle, you're around the corner. You've got the grip. You can get on the throttle. You can brake later. I feel like the racing's definitely. And I feel like this also goes into the real life aspect of, is the racing better? From my side, I feel like league racing, the gaps are closer. If we're talking about overtaking, I really feel like it's not as good as it was on 20 and 21.
Definitely.
Just from a grip standard, especially what Sub just said about I feel like dive bombs are controversial, but like just a general, like normal, an acceptable dive bomb is not as, it's not as easy to pull off in this game. So I feel like that's one thing they really need to work on for 24. But, everyone's got mixed views. I mean, I think the final point to wrap up on, because I know we said we talk about this, right now, I mean, we haven't got Austria included in this as of now, but the current standings Jack's quite far ahead. I think I think everyone expects Jack to kind of pull. I don't think there's gonna be major handling change, so I'd expect the order to stay relative. So I know we've got some people coming back. You've got the likes of Ondra, Hops coming back. Fast drivers like that who are going to be on pace. I mean, from my side, I'm in terms of like drivers to watch for 24. It's going to be interesting to see if these little changes can shuffle the order around. But I think obviously Jack's got to be someone to watch for next year. I mean, with Beeford back as well, the new game, the first season will be probably the most intense. It really will be depending. Because I hear that it's much easier to lock the rears as well on the new game.
Yeah, because like I was saying, it's all about balance. It's probably going to be all about balance next season.
The rear brakes have been made significantly less strong.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're now half as, or like 75% as strong as they were before.
So I think setup's going to be massive.
It's not going to be where you can run what was Bahrain's like setup, like 43s, 36. You're not going to be able to run anything like that again.
Especially into turn one at Bahrain, you'd lock.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's all going to be about adaptability. But I mean, if you... For the first season, you've got all the big dogs back. You've got Jack. Yeah, you've got Jack. Ondra's back. Hops is back. You've got all those Beefords back. You've got all those big names. If you had to just punt or make a guess on who you think would come out on top, and I guess there's a relative some form of bias, especially for me and Sub in our roles as drive TPs. But who I think Sebi, I guess, because you're probably the best person to answer this question. From your side, who do you think's the best placed to come out on top? Who do you think would win the first season once everyone's back?
It's definitely hard to say because of the fact that everybody is extremely close, but at the same time, it's a new game. Who is going to adapt the best? That's the bigger question we should ask here instead of like who's going to win, because that's something that's still in the stars. Who knows? Jack could majorly fall off, or maybe Wandy could finally get a win in CRF 1, for example. Like, it's going one way, it can go the other, but it's not known right now because we don't know how the game handles and how everybody performs.
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, like the true judge of a driver is their, adaptability between cars. I think me and Sub are going to have very contrasting answers here. I think the top two will always be Beeford and Jack. Purely just, if we're looking at 23, out of the 3 seasons we've had so far, not excluding the 4th one, which is going on at the moment, it looks like Jack will win. Again, you never know what will happen, but Jack's won 2 seasons. Beeford won 1 season. He won 1 title. Obviously, Beeford only raced for 2 seasons, and like Sub said, on the 2nd season he wasn't as focused on it because he was working on iRacing for CRF and stuff, so he had other stuff as the game's kind of dropped off whilst everyone's waiting for the new game. I'm always going to back Jack as my driver. I think Sub's answer would be the same kind of background behind the reasoning, is that it will be between Sub and Beeford. Between Jack and Beeford. Yep. You're not. No offense, you're not included. Between Jack and Beeford for the title for the first season. I'm very interested to see what happens with Hops, because I feel like Hops on 22 was mega fast, and on 23 he was still mega fast. And maybe it's just because the new drivers coming in. I mean, you naturally have that evolution of faster drivers coming in. I mean, if you look at like a CRF historically from like a championship perspective, it was me. Then you have Jamie come in. Then you have Flo, who bottled, and Hops kicked his ass. And then you've got Hops, which then transitioned to Jack, but then went to Beeford, which now gone back to Jack, and then you've got Dom emerging in fast pace. Like, there's a natural evolution of drivers' pace, but it's between Jack and Beeford, and I back Jack. I think Jack's really good at adaptability. His racecraft's always brilliant. Always brilliant. I mean, today he was unlucky not to win. If it wasn't for safety car, I firmly think he would have won. All credit to Switch. I think it was an incredible drive, and as well from Conce as well. Brilliant drive from Conce. I mean, yeah. I mean, Conce came from, I think, qualified like 5th or 6th. Back up to P3. Solid drive from Conce today. I think Conce has put a lot more focus onto his racecraft. Because I think that's always been an area, especially last season, he struggled with the racecraft. So I think now he's working more towards his race pace and becoming more a complete driver. So I mean, from my side for next year, I put my money on Jack to win the first title, and I think your opinion is going to be very much different.
So, but honestly, okay, it's going to come down to who's going to put in the hours. That's pretty much what it's going to be. We have a week until the first races for the start of the game?
Yeah, I think it's a week and a half. It's a week and a half for the Champions Edition for the early access, yeah.
Yeah, it's just going to be whoever puts the most time in. And as we've seen, Jack has put tons of time into this game. Like, I had a conversation with him a while ago. He said he literally played this game so much that he just knows where the limit is without having to practice.
Yeah.
And first off, kind of sad, but second off, I guess if you enjoy it. But Dom, I've also talked to Dom, and he's also trying to put in the hours. He's joined a team. He's been in not thousands, but he's doing other leagues as well as long as this one. So I think Dom could be up there if he puts in the time. But Beeford, I really don't know. He has so many different things going on. I don't know if he's gonna try to balance his iRacing and his F1 life. But I think Beeford might be, if he commits to the game when it comes out, then he would probably be up there with Jack. But if he doesn't, then I think he'll probably be kind of what he was like last season. Didn't really qualify pretty well, but his race pace is pretty good, so he can get up there. And then Hops, same with Hops. He doesn't really,
he's an old fox.
He practices, but he doesn't practice as much as the younger guys do. I feel like Hops could be up there. It just depends on the hours. That's really is. But my top 2 is probably going to be Jack or Dom if they put in the hours for it.
So I know you're saying you're just taking Beeford out of that just because of his iRacing commitment side.
I feel like if he has other commitments besides F1, so I think he'll be committed to other things besides this.
Well, I mean, we haven't got too long. I mean, what has it come out in May? We got like 5 weeks.
Yeah, something like that.
No, but it's coming up pretty quick. So I mean, we'll find out soon enough. But
yeah,
let's. I think we we can discuss more probably next week after we what's next week's race?
Next week's race is going to be Silverstone.
Silverstone, okay. I mean Silverstone's going to be a brilliant race. I mean, I think Silverstone always gives us good racing. So I mean,
it's always a good race.
Yeah, let's see what happens. But I mean, yeah, I think we'll see what happens with the beta. I think there's going to be a more open beta coming out soon in terms of seeing what the feedback is, because I know there obviously will be changes made.
Yeah, and wasn't it with the beta they could only test out a couple tracks too, and the game wasn't complete or anything like that. So I feel like there's a lot more stuff that needs to be fixed in the game. It's too early to say the game's trash or not.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens next week. But I think we still got an interesting constructors fight going on. I mean, obviously today that point gap was extended from Mercedes' side. I think an unlucky race from the Ferrari boys in general. I mean, I think both drivers were involved in incidents of other drivers, correct?
Next question, please. Anyways,
yeah. So I mean, we'll see what happens to Silverstone. But I mean, I think there's a title there. Obviously, I think Jack is the favourite for that title at the moment. Statistically, yeah. I mean, he's definitely the fastest on raw pace. But I think the gap's close. Maybe, and I think the real question is Switch. First win. Is this a one-off? Is it the track, or is he actually going to come back next week and be able to pull the same pace? Because if he is, then I don't think we're too far in the season for a title turnaround if there's one bad race from Jack.
Yeah, that's the thing I wish we had more of in CRF, because I got to give it to Jack. He's a very consistent driver. He's he's been at the front. I've always thought about this when I'm commentating. Like, I want to know how many laps Jack has led in this league. Definitely a lot. I could probably say over 500 at least. But like I said, I gotta give props to him where it's due. He's a very consistent driver, and I feel like there's other drivers out there that can compete with him, but they're always one-offs. And I'm hoping that Switch is not gonna be a one-off this time around, and Jack will be able to have some cool and clean competition.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out next week, and then we can. I'm sure we'll be back to discuss and see. It is the midway point of the season, so we can have a little, mid-season recap and stuff and take the results. But I think that's all from us for today's episode. Longer episode. We'll from next week onwards, we're going to be trying to get a guest on each week. Sebi was our voluntary guest for our first episode, so thank you very much, Sebi, for coming on and being our first guest.
No problem. We'll probably be many more times.
I think that sounds like a plan. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I understand it was a long one, but yeah, appreciate the support. And we'll catch you next week for another episode. Thank you very much.